Good evening and welcome to today's Tropics for August 24th, 2020. Please note, I am not a meteorologist and this video is just a collection of my thoughts and opinions about the storms I'm talking about. And for any decision making, please consult the National Hurricane Center or your local officials. So today I'm talking about Tropical Storm Marco, which is currently very sheared and heading into or actually made landfall on the mouth of the Mississippi River, and Tropical Storm Laura, which is trying to organize as it hits Cuba for probably one last time before emerging into the Gulf of Mexico. So there's not too much to speak of really of Marco anymore. Got very sheared, and that continued today, and now it's got a totally exposed and decoupled little center here, and that is now heading in, or pretty much heading inland, and this means that there aren't really any strong winds with with that storm, as it's not really producing convection to bring stronger winds on the surface, and thus there won't be major impacts really from it. There may be some showers with clouds or some of the low cloud rotating around the center, but really the real heavier rain you might see further west around the panhandle of Florida, where the trough is, or upper level trough is shearing convection to. So you might see heavier rain here. That's somewhat in relation to Marco, but there aren't really major impacts with Marco at this moment. Looking at the official National Hurricane Center cone, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. It just will go under the low-level ridging and probably head inland and maybe drop some rain, but not a huge amount. And you'll note that the warnings have been dropped, so definitely it's not really a threatening storm anymore. The more thing you should watch maybe more closely now is Tropical Storm Laura, which is trying to organize, but is now pretty much on the coast of Cuba per recon, and you're actually seeing something that has gone on for quite a few nights, and that is the northerly shear, which is basically suppressing the convection to the north, and so you have a little bit trying to wrap around here, but there isn't a whole lot, and much of the convection is to the south. So that is an effect of the northerly shear. There is some evidence, though, that it is trying to push against it. If you look around here, this bubble, you can see that the outflow tries to build up a little bit. That might be just because the storm is tracking along north or west-northwest with it, but it does seem like the northerly shear will begin to reduce as Laura goes around that ridging that is currently causing the northerly shear. But in the short term, as the low center possibly gets disrupted by mountainous terrain again, it's not super mountainous, but it might be enough to disrupt the low center. We might see something that we've seen very many times with Laura, and that would be something trying to get going further south over this deeper convection, and that would mean another south shift like the ones we've seen before, and that would probably mean another south shift in the model. So you could see a bit more trending to the south and possibly west with this storm, but we'll have to see tonight as it emerges from Cuba, because there is less land interaction, it looks like, and there is a stronger storm, so it's going to take more to actually disrupt it as much. The infrared imagery is a good way to discern how deep the convection is, or at least how cold it is, and it's relatively deep near the center, or the middle of a low at least, trying to wrap around near the coast of Cuba here. And while there is a bit of cooler convection, you can see this larger blob of cold convection, which is widespread negative 70 degrees Celsius and small areas of negative 80 degrees Celsius convection. So that's very deep convection. And there's a possibility that you might try to see something form further south, like we have before, but it really warrants watching, because it's something like that is hard to forecast, as we have seen in the past few days. Luckily, as we speak, there's a recon mission that's going into Laura at the moment, and it seems to be finding it still generally broadish system. Now, this might be partly because of less convection to the north and generally more to the south, but it does seem to be a more broad circulation, and that's at least one piece of good news in what seems to be a favorable environment coming in for hurricane or for tropical cyclone intensification. There's one good news for people in the path, and that's the still broad nature of the circulation at the moment. Now this may and quite possibly could change. This takes time, and it would slow down the intensification rate as it gets into the Gulf. So it might mean that it tries to take time getting organized, and in less time, more rapidly intensifying. So this is a piece of good news, but definitely still don't let your guard down. It has deepened a bit, and though it does seem to be heading into Cuba, the recon found some sort of a center just onshore, and this might not be quite co-located with the actual low-level center, but it definitely seems like it's heading onshore as we speak. And there's also a drop zone that was dropped into the or near the center, just northeast of the Isle of Youth. This might not be a great pressure reduction because the wind is a little high. But it does look like the pressure has gone down to 907 or 997 and 998 millibars. So does seem that has deepened just a few millibars during the day as it's gone through a lot of the northwestern Caribbean near the coast of Cuba. You can see on this water vapor loop there's quite a bit going on around Laura, and one thing is the troughing and the tropical storm Marco and its former outflow in a way. And you can see that it's powering a jet stream to around the mid-Atlantic and points east. But at the same time, it's been fueling and amplifying this upper-level ridge that seems centered around here-ish. And this is something that's going to track closer to the Gulf of Mexico and is going to provide a pretty favorable upper air environment for Laura. And looking around it, you can see one upper level low here that's tracking or that's retrograding currently north of Puerto Rico, and this is one cog in the machine that's going to cause a very favorable upper air environment for Laura. But right now, that might be actually hurting it a little because it is pushing some northeasterly wind aloft into or near the circulation, and what that means is it doesn't mean as much in terms of the easterlies because the storm itself is moving towards the west. But given that Laura is tracking more west northwest or towards the west northwest, but the shear is moving to the west southwest, you're going to get a bit more of a kind of northerly shear, and that is what we have been seeing with the convection and outflow too. Suppressed a bit more to or suppressed on the north side, but pretty healthy on the south side, and a lot of convection to the south. And let's mark that upper low here. And then there's another upper low on Texas, or or over Texas. And so you're going to have tropical storm Laura between these two upper lows, and that's going to provide likely a double outflow channel for Laura, and that would likely strengthen it quite a bit, as that is a very, very favorable upper air environment for tropical cyclones. Here's another thing that may disrupt, but may not disrupt the almost ideal environment in the Gulf of Mexico for Laura. And this is a little bit of sneaky mid-level shear, and you actually saw this with Florence a little bit, and this doesn't guarantee that we're going to see something that disrupts the storm. But if you look here, there's mostly southeasterly or east southeasterly flow on the low levels and some of the upper levels roughly. However, if you look around 500 millibars, you have a more easterly wind, and as a result, it's not quite aligned with most of the flow, and that's how you get about 15 knots of northwesterly mid-level shear. So this isn't guaranteed to disrupt the circulation or the structure, at least. However, it might disrupt the structure when there are eyewall replacement cycles going on, and that might disrupt it for a little bit with a sneaky mid-level shear, and that might slow strengthening at least for a little bit. But that's kind of hard to see when that occurs or if that occurs. Another thing would be the cool eddy here. It's not likely. It's not expected to go directly over this, it looks like, but it might clip it, and that means there's less energy in the water. Still very warm, but it doesn't go too deep, and this might mean a bit less impressive convection as it goes over this area. So it may be a little speed bump, but given that there's a lot of higher OHC or ocean heat content as it tracks west of it, it definitely looks like it'll allow it to strengthen a bit further to the west. Unfortunately, there hasn't been an H-dwarf parent run since 6Z or this morning. So, unfortunately, we can't see on the H-dwarf model what it thinks about what the spatial look of the upper air conditions look like. However, on the GFS, which is a little different, doesn't quite strengthen it as much probably because it's a global model. It does make it strong, but you can see the general gist of what it's going to look like. And here are those double upper lows here, and these are allowing for strong northeasterly flow aloft and southwesterly flow aloft. On the edges of the anticyclone that's above Laura, and so that would again be those double outflow jets, which are pretty favorable for a tropical system because it allows air to evacuate out of the system, and that lowers pressures, so it makes storms like this more intense. So it's definitely a good look for the storm, and it's a major reason for the expected intensification and the reason why it looks like such an ideal environment. Now, looking a bit further out, so this is Thursday morning, very early, about when the National Hurricane Center expects Laura is going to try to make a landfall, and you can see that it's moved a bit to the northwestern side of the upper level anticyclone, and so that means you have a bit of southwesterly flow trying to get into the circulation, and that might mean it might start looking a little less impressive as it gets to the coast. This isn't too uncommon, especially if you have a system that's being brought up by a trough. So you might see it look a little less impressive, but it still is likely to be a strong storm, even if it starts getting sheared. And luckily, we have a bit of a better look at, or a better idea of the steering. And basically, it looks like even if the system is deeper, it'll start to curve a bit more to the north as you start getting towards the west, and that's because of this mid-level extension of the upper low over Texas. And this is this is on Wednesday evening, or at least EDT. And so you have this mid-level extension of the upper low, and so if you have this low at that level, that means the ridging can't build west because it can't build into a trough that's there. So that means you have the western end of the ridge here, and that means a system there would start getting steered more to the north on the western end of the ridge, and that's indeed what looks to be happening. We even have a bit more convergence in the tab suite here. These are purely statistical models, but does give us a good idea of what kind of steering will be depending on how strong it is. So again, it still looks like a stronger storm goes a bit more southwest, but there is good agreement that there will be a north bend at least somewhere, even on the strong tab. So that would mean a strong storm gets felt more by upper level flow, so it tracks a bit more west northwest for longer. But it does seem that a landfall somewhere in Louisiana looks generally likely right now. There's still a possibility for shifts because as I said earlier, it does look like there is a small possibility for a shift more to the south west, as we have seen in the past few nights, and that might trend things a bit to the west. So definitely, if you're in the west, even if you're near the cone, don't be complacent because the trends can get closer to you. So definitely keep an eye on the storm, even if you're just near the cone. So in the short term, rain from Laura's convection will likely cause some heavy rain over parts of Cuba, and that might mean some flooding and possibly mudslides given the hilly terrain of Cuba. So that might, definitely, if you're around there, don't let your guard down because there are still impacts coming and some tropical storm force winds, hence the tropical storm warnings. So it is still going to be a dangerous storm before it passes by into the Gulf. So there are going to be impacts there, but the more severe ones look to be further to the north on the northern Gulf Coast as it approaches the coast. There's a possibility for even a major hurricane landfalling there, although it's not quite explicitly forecast by the National Hurricane Center. And you can see the watches and warnings are starting to go up. Right now, just tropical storm watches for the outer ends, and hurricane watches for where the core could go into. So if you're in these regions, definitely make sure you are preparing, as the storm will be heading into the area as soon as midweek, and heed the advice of your local officials, as there is a possibility that you may need to evacuate out of the area if the storm is especially strong. But definitely keep your eye on the trends as it approaches. Given the generally shallow continental shelf and the strong or expected relatively strong storm, one risk, and a pretty major risk, will be storm surge as Laura comes in. And it generally will come around here, but you can see it's a bit biased east from the forecast where it's supposed to go around to this area. And that is because you're going to get onshore flow towards the east of the system, which is going to pile up a lot more water in these coastal areas. And you can see it's up to even 7 to 11 feet on some parts of the some parts of southern coastal Louisiana and extreme eastern Texas. So there is definitely a quite high surge, and if you're in a low-lying area, there is a possibility you could get flooding due to the storm surge coming in. So definitely be prepared for flooding in your area if you are in a low-lying or flood-prone area. And this surge will be relatively expansive too, even all the way out to Mississippi and near Louisiana on Lake Pontchartrain. It won't be quite as severe, but there will be a few feet, which might cause some minor flooding if you're in those flood-prone areas, and then extending west to Galveston. So definitely be prepared for the storm if you are near or in the projected cone, and definitely prepare for the worst. So prepare for a few categories higher than the National Hurricane Center predicts. So prepare for the worst, such as that. But as always, hope for the best. If you have any questions, that's pretty much all I have to talk about tonight. If you have any questions or comments about my video, please let me know. And thanks for watching.